George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
It's Thanksgiving, so who is the turkey? I can't say happy Thanksgiving because I'm still mourning for Geronimo, if you get my drift. But I very definitely hope that Donald Trump's efforts to bring the war in Ukraine to an end succeed. Unfortunately, not everyone in his administration agrees. We'll be talking with two very considerable experts on the issues of war and peace in Europe and indeed the world. You've come to the right place if that is of interest to you. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It is Thanksgiving, but the question of who is the turkey is still an open one. The deadline given by Donald Trump to Volodymyr Zelensky was tomorrow, Thanksgiving. And if he didn't want to sign up to the Donald Trump peace deal, then he could, and I quote the president, fight his little heart out. Well, that was a clear enough indication that Trump was pulling stumps, was saying this far and no further. This war has got to end. But it isn't. And the deadline has been missed. And I'm going to argue the probably unpopular line that the turkey in this picture is not the one that was pardoned there by Donald Trump. It's definitely not the snow-coloured one in that picture, the one that's basted and glazed in the Oval Office just a few months ago, told he had no cards, told that he shouldn't have started a war that he couldn't finish. It's not anyone other than Donald Trump. What do I mean by that? First of all, it requires you to bear with me when I say that I genuinely believe that Donald Trump is trying to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. I genuinely believe that the peace plan, 28 points that he drew up following the Anchorage summit between him and President Putin, was a decent and genuine effort to bring the war to an end. I believe the man that butchered the turkey is Marco Rubio. I believe that Marco Rubio has allied himself with the part of the Republican Party that wants the war to continue, with the entire Democratic Party and its establishment and their media, and of course the yapping chihuahuas of the European Union. I believe that Rubio has formed a ramp with them to gut the 28 points of anything meaningful in them that could have led to a peace agreement. I said to you just the other night on Sunday that it goes without saying that anything amended to suit Ukraine will commensurately fail to suit Russia, and that the difference between the two parties was that the latter was losing the war and the former was winning it. Russia is winning the war. The loser in a war does not get to dictate the terms of its ending. And I believe that now this war will continue until an unconditional surrender is signed, not in Budapest, not in Istanbul, not in Saudi Arabia or the UAE, but I believe the final unconditional surrender will be signed in Kiev. Of course, it goes without saying that I hope against hope, that I'm wrong about that. But let's analyze how we've got to the stage Well, that is my honest point of view. Well, the 28 points became roughly 20 points. Some say 19 points. But in the fewer number lies the bigger devil in the detail. The whole point of Russia's special military operation, on which such blood and treasure has been expended, such international ostracism and exclusion has been suffered, that it's simply ludicrous to expect Russia to stop the war that it's winning on the basis of a program which allows Ukraine to join Ukraine. That's simply ridiculous and absurd. Equally ridiculous is the idea that 20 or so members of NATO, not wearing NATO badges, will send their armed forces into Ukraine. Not just into Kiev, but Mr. Macron, President Macron, he's a particular affection for his forces being stationed in Odessa. You need to know a bit of history here. 100 years ago, French forces were in Odessa, and they were driven out ignominiously by the Red Army and the resurgent forces of the Bolshevik Revolution. And they have never forgotten it, and their president is determined to return to it. They know they'll never get back to a Crimea war, but the British are desperate, salivating, even as they deliver a budget of penury, poverty, and cold for their own people at home. They are determined to situate their own sons and their own country's wealth in the western part of Ukraine, maybe even in the capital of Kiev. Both of these clauses are not just unacceptable, they are literally non-starters. They are the precise reason why Russia started the special military operation in the first place. But the 19 or 20 points that Marco Rubio, in a marvelous, wonderful meeting, he said that he had with the Ukrainian side, is sincerely putting these forward as an offer to President Putin and the Russian government. Well, the plan fails on those two cases alone, but there are more. The plan requires Russia to agree to $100 billion, euros actually, of their sovereign wealth to be stolen by the European Union, by NATO, and spent in Ukraine on their behalf. Now, they don't mean spent on the parts of the Ukraine that have been liberated by the Russian armies. They mean to spend Russia's 100 billion euros on Zelensky's Kiev, Ukraine. You really think the Russian taxpayer would agree to that? The plan for the demilitarization of the Ukraine was a fundamental part of the reason for the SMO in the first place. A demilitarized Ukraine means an army of 100 or 200,000. Trump's original plan reduced the Ukrainian army to 600,000. Rubio's rodent attempt to wreck Donald Trump's peace plan sets the Ukrainian armed forces at 800,000. That's almost 10 times the entire strength of the British armed forces. Now, of course, Ukraine could not possibly afford a standing army of 800,000 people, but then you'd be paying for it. You, the taxpayers of the United Kingdom, that were just hammered today to the highest ever level of taxation in Britain, 38% of your whole income will now go on tax so you could maintain Zelensky's army in Ukraine, so your sons can be conscripted to go and stand and wait for hostility and death in the Ukraine, as Macron has just told the young men and women of France that they must do. He's introducing conscription in France and has advised Keir Starmer to do the same in Britain. An 800,000 strong standing army paid for by you. Plus the accelerated membership into the European Union, so that you, the European taxpayer, can carry the burden of the basket case, which is the Ukrainian society forevermore, rather like you are doing in the NATO protectorate in Kosovo, so called. These proposals are not just a disaster for any possibility of ending the war. They guarantee the continuation of the war. Trump's peace plan has become a new war plan. Because, of course, when Putin, as he inevitably would have to, rejects root and branch, what we must now call the Rubio peace plan, then, of course, they will use that rejection to put your expenditure on weapons and war, your commitment of your sons and daughters to that war, and, if Rubio feels he can get away with it, to force the United States to become not less involved in the war, but more involved in the war. That's how it looks to me. We'll hear from Scott Ritter and from Chay Bowes how it looks to them. But my take, and I was quite recently in Russia, my take from everybody I spoke to, that the underlying and indeed overwhelming principle involved in their agreeing or not to call off the SMO is that their sons and daughters will not have to fight this war again. But if you've got French forces in Odessa, if you've got British forces in Kiev, if you've got Latvian Boy Scouts in Kiev, if you've got German forces in the Ukraine, not wearing a NATO badge, wearing a European Intervention Force badge, then fighting this war all over again is inevitable. It's guaranteed. Because Rubio proposes a kind of Chapter 5 security agreement by these guaranteeing forces, mainly European Union forces and United Kingdom forces, whereby if anything happens, all of these countries have to, it's even stricter than Chapter 5 of the NATO treaty, which doesn't compel anyone, merely compels them to give consideration to any attack on a NATO member. This Rubio plan agrees a European Chapter 5 which will compel its members to begin hostilities in support of Ukraine if any breach of the treaty agreed is detected. Well, of course, any provocation, any agent provocateur, any false flag could bring the whole European Union armies into direct war with Russia. And Russia has been here before. This is something so many people, too many people, just have forgotten or perhaps never knew. I told you about the French forces driven out of Odessa in the early 1920s. What about the British forces in Murmansk, and archangel sent by Winston Churchill to occupy swathes of Russia. We had 100,000 British soldiers who thought they were going home at the end of the First World War, but who were instead sent to occupy Russia. Russia will not tolerate that again. And why would they, when they are winning the war? But there's a second, even bigger and more recent reason. Russia was invaded through the Ukraine by Adolf Hitler. If you want to go back, invaded through Ukraine by the Kaiser. If you want to go back, invaded through Ukraine by Napoleon. There's a reason why Russia made Ukraine their red line. They know that an invasion through the Ukraine is a dagger at the heart of Moscow, of St. Petersburg, of Russia as a state. And it's not as if these European leaders have made any secret about their ultimate objective. They have repeated it over and over again. Russia is too big, they say. Russia is too powerful, they say. Russia is too rich, they say. Russia will have to be broken up. There needs to be 5 Russias, or 7 Russias, or 10 Russias. The better, through balkanization, to be dominated and controlled by the same world forces, economic and political, that dominate so much else of the globe. For these reasons and many more that I'm sure my friends will agree to talk about in the rest of the show, Marco Rubio has set Donald Trump up to fail. He has deliberately sabotaged the Trump peace plan and shattered it into a dozen pieces. He has dashed the hopes of tens, scores, hundreds of millions of people all around the world. A peace plan that is agreed by Zelensky is not worth the paper that it isn't written on. You know, Russia has still not seen even the 28-point plan, never mind the 19 or 20-point plan. Nothing has been sent to them. This is an attempt to railroad Russia into agreeing a plan that will bring not peace but the danger of ever-present war. This is an attempt to place the Ukraine, having lost all those men, having lost all that land, having lost all that blood and treasure, right at the tip of the spear, which Russia's historic enemies refuse to put down, refuse to beat into a plowshare. Just time for 2 minutes on the British budget. Keir Starmer's government, the most unpopular in the entire history of British politics. Keir Starmer, the most unpopular Prime Minister since polling began. The British Labour government was today, while that budget was being adumbrated, which was not necessary because it had all leaked before the budget, something that once upon a time would have caused the Chancellor to be forced to resign. The British police were handcuffing Britain's farmers who had come on an entirely lawful, entirely peaceful protest to be in Whitehall with their tractors, causing no trouble. They're not French, you know, and which had already been agreed by the Metropolitan Police. The men, the tractors, had all been paid. All of their congestion charge had been paid. All of the necessary papers had been obtained. The entire thing had been coordinated with the Metropolitan Police. But as she was speaking, farmers, the people who feed us, the people without whom we would starve, were being carried away in chains, arrested by the same police officers who are usually found arresting old age pensioners, old ladies, and disabled people on Saturdays and Sundays on another matter. It was, I believe, highly symbolic of the way in which Britain is going to the dogs. We'll see if the dogs of war prevail when we talk to our star guest, Scott Ritter, right after this short break. Stay tuned. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age, and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump try to assassinate Venezuela's President Maduro? That's the poll for the evening. Yes or no? 15,000 people have already answered. And fairly, unfortunately for Maduro, fairly heavily of the belief that Trump will try. So you can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, please, please, please subscribe to my channel. Still, more than half of you watching on the YouTube stream have not subscribed to the channel, which costs you nothing at all. I can't quite understand that. And give a thumbs up if you enjoy the show. You can also vote if you're in the creme de la creme, in the vanguard. If you are a follower of mine on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote there. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer and weapons inspector extraordinaire. But ever since then, he's become no less than a sage on matters of war and peace. And I'm glad to say he's generous with his time for the mother of all talk shows. Scott, it's Thanksgiving tomorrow. Who's going to be the turkey? What's going to be on the menu? Is this peace plan, as I have just said, effectively dead in the water? It's been reverse ferreted by Rubio to be a war plan rather than a peace plan. What's your take?
I can say that the turkey that I'm going to be preparing tomorrow for my family has a better chance of walking away from my table alive than this peace plan has of passing muster with the Russian Federation. And the turkey's already dead, so this peace plan stands no chance whatsoever. It's dead on arrival as currently configured. It was a poison pill from the start. I don't know, I not enough is known about, who came up with the original 28 points. There's talk about, ongoing back and forth between Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff, but there are just some things in there that are just so blatantly unrealistic. A 600,000 strong Ukrainian army. They started the special military operation started with a 260,000 strong Ukrainian military, and that included over 60,000 NATO trained forces who were rushed towards the Donbass to invade and overrun and end the separatist republics in Lugansk and Donetsk. Today, the Ukrainian military hovers around 700,000 or so. Not only is 600,000 unrealistic, apparently the Ukrainians came back and said they want 800,000. This would make them, have not only the largest land army in Europe, but that it would double the size of the nearest competitor. So, this is just a ridiculous non-starter. The Russians made it clear in their discussions in Istanbul that they would accept about a 60,000 strong Ukrainian force. That's all Ukraine needs for legitimate self-defense. Anything larger than that, is an offensive combat force, and Russia's not going to allow that. Frozen line where Kherson and Zaporizhia and parts of the Donbass remain under Ukrainian control. No, that's just a non-starter. NATO membership, non-starter. This plan is dead. I think, trying to figure out why this plan came into being, the only logical thing I can think of is to follow up on the conversation that Secretary of the Army Driscoll had with his Ukrainian counterparts in Kiev, where he said, "You have lost this war. You're going to lose decisively. Your only hope now is to stop the war on terms that allow you to retain something. But if you turn down a peace offer with Russia, you're going to lose everything." And right now we have a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue. Let's see how it shapes out. But the plan, in order to survive, will have to be radically different than what it currently is.
So the question, and so many times this has been the question, is this a cock-up or a conspiracy? You see, I take the view, it's unpopular in some quarters, that Donald Trump genuinely wanted to end the war in Ukraine, but that the forces ranged against him, including in his own cabinet, principally in the form of Marco Rubio, but not exclusively, part of the Republican Party, all of the Democratic Party, all of the liberal media in the US, and all of the European Union were determined to wreck it. So the question is, was it ever real? And if so, who wrecked it and why?
There are many in the establishment, Trump establishment, et cetera, who are talking about this. There are several leaks associated with leaking this 28-point peace plan is one leak. Now they're leaking a two phone conversations with Russian officials and Steve Witkoff. Somebody is basically breaking the law. The 28-point peace plan, there is some speculation that this was done either by Keith Kellogg or at the behest of Keith Kellogg as a final effort to undermine the peace effort. Keith Kellogg is, of course, the man who helped destroy the Alaska process, the Anchorage process. He also, is the guy who got Marco Rubio to take a hardline stance, and he was thriving. He got a huge medal from Zelensky, rewarding him for his service to Ukraine. This is an American, by the way. And things were going his way until Lavrov had a phone call with Rubio. When Rubio tried to push the Kellogg talking points on Lavrov cut him off at the knees in what I'm told is a very direct, blunt, uncharacteristically blunt rebuttal of the plan that Rubio was trying to push on that. And I think at that point in time, Trump realized that Kellogg was an impediment and he had to go. And I think this was Kellogg's parting gift. But it also appears that there are foreign intelligence services, more than likely the Baltic states, who have intercepted phone calls and are releasing the transcripts of these phone calls, again, at the behest of Keithkellogg and people like him who are trying to undermine this peace process. Trump wants peace. There's no doubt about that. I'm not saying that Trump is the ideal interlocuteur for peace, but he wants peace. That's better than Biden did. But he is being stabbed in the back at every step of the way by people like Marco Rubio, Keithkellogg, and others who are just Russophobic at their core.
So if you and I are both right, and your turkey does not rise and walk away from your table tomorrow, what happens next, Scott?
Sadly, I think what happens next is Russia is going to be compelled to win this war, void of a peace treaty. I don't see how Zelensky and the Europeans can allow Russia to be given the gift of peace. They don't want it. I mean, look at Kelly Kala. She's coming out and saying, I mean, it's just stupidity, to be honest. It's Russia who must disarm. It's Russia who must get rid of its defense industry. Basically they're flipping the script. They live in a fantasy world. As Secretary of Army Driscoll said, the truth is now clear and unequivocal. The Russians are winning decisively. They're destroying the Ukrainian army. Everything we've been talking about, this culminating moment, is coming to pass now. The best brigades of Ukraine are surrounded by the Russians in Kupyansk and Pokrovsk, being slaughtered as we speak. Other brigades are being surrounded in other towns which can no longer be defended. There are no reserves left worthy of the name. Ukraine doesn't have any defensive lines behind the Pokrovsk lines because the billions of dollars that were allocated to these defense were embezzled, put into the pockets of criminal people. So now the army's falling back saying, where are the trenches? Where are the fortifications? They don't exist. And what you do then, if you can't defend, the army's compelled to go into a series of counterattacks, localized counterattacks, in an effort to stop the Russian momentum. But they're doing so with equipment that hasn't been hardened for battlefield. There's no anti-drone screens. There's no steel spikes. This is just raw equipment coming in from rear areas, and Russian drones are having a field day slaughtering them. This is a bloodbath, and you're going to see a rapid, decomposition of Ukrainian combat cohesion in the days to come. The Russians are going to be starting to make huge territorial gains. And once that happens, there's no reason for Russia to go to the peace table. I mean, Russia will get everything it wants through force of arms. It's over for Ukraine. It's over. This is a tragedy. This is a tragic moment for the Ukrainian people. But this is what you get when you elect somebody named Volodymyr Zelensky, who is a asset of Western intelligence doing Western government's bidding, an actor reading a script written by people who have nefarious intent when it comes to Russia.
So a lot of blood on the snow this coming winter. That will, of course, drive the warmongers in Washington and in Europe crazy. Will they be tempted? And if they were, what would the impact be to themselves intervene in the conflict?
First of all, the United States is not going to get involved. I think what we're going to see here is that the President Trump is going to confront Zelensky in the near future about the absolute necessity of Ukraine making all the concessions necessary to get Russia to get on board, and Zelensky will refuse, and Trump will walk away. So America is not going to get involved. That's not only bad for Zelensky, but it's bad for Europe, because all of this talk about the coalition of the willing. Understand, the British don't have any forces worthy of the name that can be deployed to Ukraine. The French, the same thing. The Germans, nothing. There is no cohesive combat capable force of any size that's capable of deploying to Ukraine. And if there was, they would still require the backing of the United States, which isn't going to come. So Europe will make noise, but there will be no European troops sent to Ukraine because that's a death sentence for those troops. And Europe understands that. And the United States will do nothing to support these troops if they are committed, on the volition of independent governments. This isn't a NATO decision. This is, a decision made by this coalition of the willing, which is, speaking for Europe. This war will end with the Russians slaughtering the Ukraine army and Europe sitting there with their tail between their legs. They don't have the money for a military. They don't have a military worthy of the name. And it, as I said, it's going to be a very, very bad winter and probably early spring for both Ukraine and Europe.
So again, if you and I are correct, and that Donald Trump wanted peace but couldn't get it, that means you've got a lame duck president, doesn't it? And that's before the midterms next November.
This is going to be very tricky for Donald Trump, because you're right. If he walks away from Ukraine and come the summer of 2026, the news that is being promulgated by the anti-Trump media elite is of Ukraine abandoned by the American people. Trump isn't going to look good, but nor he can't do the opposite, which is to say, well, I'm going to fight in Ukraine, because then people say, well, you got us involved in the very war you promised us you weren't going to get us involved in. So this is why I think the Russians understand this. They understand the political realities here. I just don't know if the Trump administration has the maturity necessary to do what's required to bring this to an end in a way that doesn't feed the narcissism of Donald Trump. And I think the Russians understand this. In the leaked recording, you hear Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff talking about stroking Trump's ego. It's all about stroking Trump's ego, making Trump out to be the big man, the strong man, the great man. How this can be done, though, is a completely different question, because there's no bending on the part of Russia. They're not going to give in on these key elements. And, if Europe and Ukraine hold the line here, what can Donald Trump do?
We've not got much time, and you're always generous with us, but none of this seems to augur well for the pirates of the Caribbean, the people who are shaping up for what I think will be a Latin Vietnam. I've got to tell you, I rewatched Platoon last night, Oliver Stone's masterpiece, which was a sanguine reminder for me of just how awful the Vietnam experience was, mainly for the Vietnamese, but in no small measure for the American people themselves and their armed forces. Are we really going to see war in Venezuela?
I don't believe so, and I'll tell you why. Because even though the number of ships and everything looks impressive on paper, they only have the ability to put 4,000 Marines on the ground. You need more, you need the Marines to seize a port facility or seize airports and then fly in additional troops, marry them up with equipment. It would require hundreds of thousands of troops just to get a foothold in Venezuela. And then we're talking about, advancing into this jungled interior. That is your analogy of Vietnam is absolutely right. It's Vietnam all over again. Instead of speaking Vietnamese, they'll speak Spanish. This is why you see Donald Trump talking about negotiations. Now, I know anybody who paid attention to what happened with Hezbollah and Iran understands the United States doesn't negotiate in good faith, and we're fully capable of committing perfidy, which is a war crime, by the way. But right now, I think Trump has been told that there is no viable military solution, that the covert option isn't mature yet, and that you don't want to go off half-cocked before midterms. Because again, if you go into the midterm election knee-deep in a war of choice in Venezuela, where your excuse, drugs, will quickly evaporate, just like the WMD excuse evaporated in Iraq, you're going to lose that election. So I think Trump is going to be looking to negotiate with Maduro to come up with sort of compromise situation, in keeping the military pressure on and buying time for the CIA to come up with, a viable plan. But I don't see the execution of a military strike taking place until after midterm elections in November, if at all.
Well, I hope you're right, but then you usually are right. Scott Ritter, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Enjoy that turkey. I hope it doesn't get away from you. Will Trump try to assassinate Venezuelan President Maduro? Yes or no? Well, the balance is slightly changing a bit to Maduro's favor. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Chay Bowes, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Disturbing breaking news, though unconfirmed, I stress unconfirmed, but sufficiently serious, that thousands of Imran Khan supporters are heading for Adiala jail in Pakistan on rumours that Imran Khan has been murdered by the Pakistan army inside the jail. I have no way of knowing whether that news is true, but it could not be more serious if it is, and in any case, it seems likely to lead to bloodshed on the streets of Pakistan this evening. Will Trump try to assassinate Venezuelan President Maduro? Yes or no? Get voting now. Whilst we listen to Walter in Blackpool on the Trump peace deal. Go ahead, Walter.
Well, good evening, George, and thanks for having me. What I would like to say is that the course for Trump to pursue is quite simple. I think all he has to do is to make some cosmetic alterations to the 28-point peace plan, such as, for example, saying, well, okay, we'll allow the Ukrainians to have 400,000 an Armstrong. As you pointed out, they had about 260,000 to start with, so that would already be a major concession in itself. And then simply to say, well, if you don't accept the rest of the plan, well, we're just withdrawing from the European theatre, taking our money with us. And also what he could say, well, we will refuse to finance NATO any further. Yeah. Now he'll say, well, you can still carry on with NATO without us if you can, but I don't think that will last very long. So I think Trump still has the upper hand in this.
Well, he does, Walter, if he had the balls to do it. But it seems to me that he no longer has the political juice to do it. He has made the same mistake that he made in his first term when he appointed people like John Bolton at his right hand. In appointing Marco Rubio, he's gone one better. He's got a young John Bolton of exactly the same cast of mind. And as to cosmetic amendments, all the amendments are going in the opposite direction. And that's because Trump allowed Rubio to go to, I say, impose himself in Trump's peace plan process, go to Geneva at the weekend and declare that he'd persuaded the Ukrainians to sign up for an amended deal. But the amendments to the deal render it null and void in Moscow. And therefore, it was not an amended peace deal, it's an amended war deal. That's the problem, Walter. What say you?
But the thing is that all Trump has to do is to tap into the deep feeling of the Americans, which is they are absolutely fed up of being dragged into other people's wars, particularly what they regard as European civil wars. So, as I said, I think that would tap into a very deep populism on the part of the Americans, simply to withdraw, to take their bat home.
Well, I'm with you on that, but I think he no longer has the political juice to make that kind of choice, but we'll see. Thanks, Walter, as always. Now, you can also leave comments on YouTube. Just scan the QR code on the corner of your screen. Now, Lewis Sharp did. MI6 tapped Witkoff's phone and released recordings trying to throw the peace negotiations. Well, I would normally look to them first, but Lewis, it was Scott Ritter who said it was probably the Baltic states. Frank O'Mahony says British soldiers' lives put at risk for Zelensky and his crooks and European warmongers. And Mr. Saucy says Russian naval vessels in the Caribbean will deter Trump. It's a reminder to NATO that they broke the agreement by moving into the east. Martin Kicks, 2150, says it's deja vu a la 1968. The protracted hysterical madness of procrastination and prevarication that was the Paris Peace Accords to end the Vietnam War. It was signed. 5 years later, Saigon fell. Indeed, I'm in Vietnam frame of mind at the moment. My good wife and I have watched Good Morning Vietnam and then Platoon on consecutive evenings. I don't know, maybe Apocalypse Now, the big enchilada this evening after the show. Tam McIntosh says Trump will stop the war in Ukraine, then turn his attention to Venezuela. Trump will be gobbling the turkey tomorrow. Bubba is having a day off. You'd need to have watched previous episodes to get that one. Harjot is in Canada on AI data centers. Oh, do tell, Harjot.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Galloway. How are you doing today?
By the grace of God, good. Thank you.
Lovely to hear that. I'd like to say before I get into this, that last comment about Trump gobbling down Bubba is freaking priceless. That's hilarious.
Especially when we now know that Bubba was Ghislaine Maxwell's horse. It's eye-watering.
Well, that's exactly it. The funny thing is, I remember Putin, before the election, said that he had a photograph that would change America, and we always thought it was regarding to the golden bricks over at building number 7. But now I'm starting to wonder if it was a picture of Bubba this entire time, if that was the one that was going to change the election. Oh, God. He's not going to live that down, Mr. Trump.
We better not go down any further on that. Harjot, make your point.
Exactly. Yeah, so real quick, I just want to talk a bit about the resources and water and stuff. So as a Canadian, I've had the privilege of living in a land that's so fertile, from minerals to like spring waters, glaciers, all that good stuff. I'm sure you've been in Canada before. It's quite a beauty.
Sure.
Yeah, so previously during the Harper administration, one thing that we have learned is that the Conservatives at the time signed a deal with Nestle, and the entire deal was to sell our natural water for cents on the dollar. And when I say cents on the dollar, a statistic was done in 2019, and they were spending 50 cents per 1,000 liters, while the average Canadian was spending about $3.89. So it works out to be about 12.8%. And looking at that, it really got me thinking, like, when billionaires put themselves in a position to purchase our resources, it's always to benefit themselves and never the community. And I'm saying this now in regards to the AI data centers, and this is to my fellow Americans down south. In Texas, I've always heard that they're going through droughts in certain cities, and the statistics are it's about 4 million that are going through droughts, and that's being different levels categorized from D1, D2, and so on. And what I'd like to tell to the Americans now is get yourself in a position to protest this now, because what this billionaire wants to do is to purchase 14 billion gallons of water annually for these data centers. And then the issue is not only that he's going to take the water from the wells, is that it's going to mix in with coolant, just as you would antifreeze in a vehicle. And what that's going to do is that's going to circulate, and they're going to use that up. And then once it's time to recycle that, they're going to drain it back out into the rivers, creeks, or whatever means that they have. And I'm sure there's no way to really isolate the coolant from the water. And I feel like it's just going to cause more and more of a problem. And then while you have Americans like in Flint, like over near Flint there, that have toxic water they can't even drink out of the taps, to now billionaires purchasing this water, I just feel like that system just isn't right. And I feel like it needs to be addressed before it's written in stone. And
very well described, eye-wateringly well described. And it sounds like a very bad deal for Canada, as it would be for any country. Thank you, Harjot. Now, a note for your diaries. There's a Workers' Party live stream tomorrow night. Please check out our campaign talk with Mark Belshaw, who's joined this week by Charlie Toes and Harun Khan, top candidates of ours. You can catch it on the Workers YouTube and Rumble pages, as well as on my channels from 9 p.m. UK time. On the line, another English caller is Terence in Reading. Well, he's Irish actually, but he's in England. On you go, Tel.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. All this talk of horseplay is enough for me, to be quite frank. 2 points for your consideration. First of all, I hope you and your family are well as well. 2 points for your consideration.
Good,
Nathan
thanks.
Gill, 10.5 years for asking questions. Seems a bit steep to me. I'd like your opinion on that. And secondly, and more importantly for me, is if Mr. Putin, being a man of his word, has known him to be, even though I've got major issues with the fella, I've known him to be a man of his word, and like the Persians themselves. If Mr. Putin and this deal comes about, will Mr. Yanukovych be reinstated as a democratically elected, not concocted or shoved out by America? Will he be reinstated as the president of the Ukraine, and will Zelensky end up in Switzerland? What's the use, sir?
Well, that's exactly what ought to happen, because, of course, he was illegally usurped and driven from the country. But I don't believe for a minute that will happen. I think everyone has moved on from him. It's much, much more likely that a rump Ukrainian state, even supposing one still exists after the military defeat of Ukraine and the signing of an unconditional surrender in Kiev, insofar as any rump state is permitted to continue to exist, it'll be a Russia-friendly president of a new vintage. And they might not even in their hearts be Russia friendly, but they will recognize that they've just lost a catastrophic war, and one which has left them truncated territorially, exhausted economically, altered beyond any possibility of repair demographically, with 9 million Ukrainians living outside, near you, on you, as I always say. Half of the prostitutes in the bordellos in Germany are now estimated to be poor Ukrainian girls. The demographic impact on Ukraine of this catastrophic journey that Zelensky has led them on cannot be underestimated. So I don't know what the final outcome will be. I suppose it will depend how much of Ukraine there is left before they cry uncle. I mean, I don't believe that Russia intended to advance on Odessa, but I now believe that it is ineluctable that they take Odessa. I did not believe they would go beyond the Dnipro River, but I now suspect that if there's no peace deal, they will be forced to, and moreover, that they will relatively easily be able to. I did not believe that Russia was going to come to the direct rescue of the hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens, not Russian speakers, Russian citizens in the territory now called Transnistria, but I now believe that they will have to. Hitherto, I believed that Russia would try to transfer that population of Russians in Transnistria to boost the population of the Novorossiyan territories taken from Ukraine. But I now see if you've taken Odessa, you might as well landlock the rump Ukrainian state. And if you landlock it, you automatically include the people of Transnistria in what would become Novorossiya territory, actually physically a part of the Russian Federation. So it depends how long all this goes on. But at the rate of advance, Terence, the pace of conquering that the Russian armed forces are now involved in, well, they could be in Kiev by Christmas, certainly by the Orthodox Christmas. Now, I don't believe that they want to do that, but the way that events are unfolding, I'm not sure that we can predict safely that they will not. On the Nathan Gill fellow, I actually don't know the story. It seems he was bribed to ask questions and make speeches in the European Parliament. Now, plainly, that's unacceptable, whoever's doing the bribing, whether it's Russia or China, or much more likely Israel, that is bribing a member of Parliament to ask specific questions, make specific speeches. Such things undermine the whole integrity of an elected body and cannot possibly be tolerated. But the point that you make, or infer rather, that you get 10.5 years when you're a nobody asking nothing burger questions in a Mickey Mouse Parliament, which is what the European Parliament is, but you can receive millions and millions from the Israel lobby in the United States, and you can support Israel for that money. You can support Israel to the detriment of your own people, and everyone knows it. It's in plain sight. Or you can be one of the hundreds, many hundreds, of members of Parliament in Britain who are suborned by Israel regularly, and in many cases since before even entering Parliament. So the contradiction is obvious. I don't necessarily think that the 10 years for this guy is excessive. It only looks excessive when you compare it with what happens if you take shekels rather than rubles. If you take shekels rather than rubles, you get promoted. If you take rubles, you get 10 years in the slammer. Thanks, Terence. Now, have you supported MOATS yet? I mean, financially supported it. You can get your name up in lights, just like these honourable donors. James Preston, James Glass, David Hall, Poe Tham, and George J. Ashkar Jr., who's a weekly donor, by the way. Thank you, George, and thanks to all of those. Be like George and Poe, who are regular donors to the mother of all talk shows. Sign up and make a recurring donation. Just scan that QR code there or visit the website, moats.tv. Well, let's talk to Robert in Jamaica on Gaza. I told you it's the Global University of the Airwaves. On you go, Robert.
George, thank you so much. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you on the 500 show. It was wonderful, like
Thank
most
you.
of your shows. Second thing is, before I go to the topic I called about, I hear you playing clips from time to time, and they're very, very interesting. But I heard a caller complimented you on something I complimented you on the first time I called you, which was your dissertation in response to when you were called to the Senate. I would implore you to play back that response you gave to Mr. Coleman. If you can even show the video, it would be amazing, because he kept sinking in his chair. He was trying to disappear. But no joke, George, it was powerful and it was clear, and I think better than anything else you can put there. I'm just suggesting.
Well, thank you. Let me tell you, Robert, that a good friend of mine, the award-winning, celebrated Irish filmmaker Sean Murray, is currently trying to make a documentary about the whole day, about the build-up to it, the consequence of it, and so on. So I'll keep you posted on that. Thank you kindly for your compliments on that. It was my best day so far, at least, and I'm greatly touched that it's still 20 years later resonates with people. To tell the truth to power, to tell the truth in the court of the Sultan is indeed an honour for me to have done so. Robert, on you go on Gaza.
Okay, yes. I wanted to say, George, that we are missing the plot, because Gaza is in as much trouble as it was before, long term, maybe not as many bombs dropping. And the problem here is the Greater Israel Plan, which is a Zionist plan, as you know, to expand and to take the land. So what has happened since this so-called ceasefire? There have been over 400 violent attacks, including bombs, drones, shootings. How many people have died? I think it was over 300. This is just since the so-called ceasefire. Israel themselves announced that up to November 11, they had destroyed over 1,500 buildings since the ceasefire. And
Yeah,
you hear
right.
you hear Ben Gvir and the other one saying, whatever his name is, that they're going to build settlements there.
Smotrich.
Yes. And I mean, the world is now taking its focus off, because thank God we all took a breather, because people aren't dying day to day. But the truth is they're still dying day to day, because over 300 have died since then. And the reason is that the Zionist plot is in great effect. And it's also in effect in the project that you were talking about, the peace project that Trump is trying to get. Now, Trump has made a lot of mistakes, and I don't think he's the straightest guy in the world, but he seems dedicated to peace, at least in some areas, and certainly in Ukraine. I want to remind you, on June 18th, I called in and I told you Trump looked like a scared rabbit in the White House. You agreed with me at the time that his demeanor was there. And I told you that his efforts for peace, I think it's genuine, but it's going to be sabotaged by the Zionists. And it's very simple, George. He gets as his state, what you call State Department head, Marco Rubio, who he actually detested. Yeah. So who is put in there?
Yes.
Adelson, Peter Thiel, take a choice. He gets Vance as vice president, put by Peter Thiel. All of these people, it's arranged that Ellison will get TikTok. All of these things have one thing in common. They're all Zionists. They're all committed to Greater Israel. And there's a deeper plot. So Rubio is going to be going on front, then meeting with these people, and as was suggested by Scott Ritter and yourself, sabotage the plan. But it's not these people who are the problem. It's the people behind. And I think we need to keep focus on these people. I just want to end this way.
Well, look, that is very powerfully articulated, Robert, and I didn't disagree with any of it, really. But we can't keep making excuses for Trump. The goods are bad advisors kind of alibi. It doesn't really wash when you're a man of his age, when you're not running for office again, when actually nobody can stop you doing what it is that you said you would do and you want to do. What's he got to lose? He can indeed be the peace president if he imposed on Zelensky the sanctions that an earlier caller laid out. Walk away. No more money. No more weapons. No more intelligence cooperation. The Europeans want to take over from us. Be our guest. Move the Latvian army pronto into Ukraine. He could do that. But the fact that he isn't doing it speaks to your June description of him as a scared rabbit. Now, Robert, I've got some quite grave news to announce. We're just hearing of a developing story from the United States tonight. 2 National Guard soldiers have been shot outside the White House. A large area between 17th and I Street behind the White House has been locked down by police. A critical incident has been declared. Donald Trump has been briefed on the shooting. Let me take a break on that point, and right after that break is the one and only Chay Bowes, political commentator and geopolitics expert. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump try to assassinate Venezuela President Maduro? Yes or no? You've got about half an hour still to cast your vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on the Patreon page. Chay Bowes is the man in the know, and he knows you know, and he's very generous with his time with the mother of all talk shows, and it's a delight on this auspicious pre-Thanksgiving to have Chay Bowes with us again. Chay, thanks for coming so readily and often to the show. Everyone always looks forward to your wisdom. So with that wisdom, where do you think we stand tonight on the prospects of an end to the war in Ukraine?
Well, thanks, George. It's always a pleasure and honor to join you. It's one of the things I look forward to doing. We always seem to move discussion somewhere, which is really important. And, I see the feedback and people seem to enjoy it. You're putting me on the spot with this one, asking me, where are we? Okay, so I'll give you my view of where we are. I mean, I'm kind of skeptical. And I think post-Alaska, I allowed myself to get a little bit too positive about the prospects for a settlement. And I have to kind of stand corrected on that. I had a long discussion with a very good friend of mine in Moscow. He's in another part of Russia, Brian McDonald, a fellow Irishman, who's an encyclopedic knowledge on the Russian political system. He's in Russia, decades at this stage. And we always spar a little bit on me being too positive or too negative and vice versa with him. And I think he was right in saying that the Russian machine seems impervious to external pressure. And I think we've seen that again and again, but we still get pulled in as Westerners to the idea that things can happen fast. And the only things that seem to be happening fast from the Russian side at the moment seems to be, and I'll paraphrase it with something I posted on X recently, an image posted by the British Ministry of Defence showing that all 6 Russian army groups are advancing. And I posted, this is the Russian 6-point plan for Ukraine. Because while all this talk goes on, all this, navel gazing and hand-wringing in Europe at this terrible fear of the prospect of a peaceful settlement. And it's analogous with, a British aristocrat looking out off his balcony saying, how dare these Russians and Americans solve my war? How dare they solve one's war? I mean, there's this sense of angst and aggression towards peace. And that's really been a definitive spectacle to see how many of these pro-war Europeans particularly have come out of the woodwork, like oozed from the woodwork to, cast down Trump's peace plan. So my view, and I'll just give you my view somewhat objectively. The Russians, as we know, have been discussing the plan. We know that prior to the publication of the 28-point plan, that there had to have been communication. I've always maintained to people that there's always been communication at a high level between the Russians. What's different about this peace process, if you like, is that it's essentially through non-traditional channel. And I mean that by saying it's not necessarily Sergei Lavrov, this veteran foreign minister, and his team. It seems to have been delegated in a way to people like Mr. Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, who I'm very fond of. I think he's a very honest human being. People like Kirill Dmitriev, who was a relatively unknown person until recently, the head of the Russian Foreign Direct Investment Fund, and people like Yuri Ushakov. A phone call between Dmitriev and Ushakov recently leaked, which is also quite remarkable, that 2 very senior Kremlin advisors would be monitored and leaked. It's obviously a Western intelligence agency has done that. So what you've seen is the process running very quickly because it's through unofficial channels, but then cooling very rapidly when it comes to people like Lavrov, this veteran foreign minister, 50 years in the job, applying this very heavy molasses of the Russian machine to it by saying, okay, look, we are still doing what we said we would do on the night of February the 24th, when President Putin announced that he would denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. And the Russian position, remember, is always founded in law. The Russian position is still that the Russian Federation intervened militarily in Ukraine because 2 of its partners, if you like, had asked them to militarily intervene in Donbass. that it's applying UN law, basically, in its attempts to deflect an existential threat to the state of Russia. So that sort of very heavy bureaucracy of how the Russian machine moves very, very, very slowly, but it moves very purposefully, very much like on the battlefield. The Russian machine is spun up now, and it's grinding forward inexorably, and nobody, even on the Ukrainian side, the British side, certainly not on the American side, who now realize that this war is lost militarily, it's merely a matter of time, would deny that. So I'm not positive about a rapid settlement of the conflict. I have to say, I'd agree with you that I think the Russian position now is very much, we'll keep talking to you on the telephone, while in the other hand, we've got the driving wheel for the military machine, and we're going to just keep pushing forward, George.
Now, I agree entirely with all of that, but it's quite clear that the enemies of Donald Trump's peace plan have moved into overdrive. The leaked conversation, not just between two senior Russian officials, but of course the leaking of transcripts which are denied by both partners, but of the conversation between Witkoff and Russian officials. These were deliberately leaked to Bloomberg to try and scupper Donald Trump. The performance of Rubio in his meetings with the Ukrainians over the weekend, in which, full of joie de vivre, he declared that he had persuaded the Ukrainians to sign a different peace deal to Donald Trump's. And then it began to emerge that amongst his 19, 20 points were articles that are just non-starters for the Russians, leading to the overwhelming feeling that Rubio is a fifth columnist. He's trying to wreck Donald Trump's peace efforts. And then I don't know if you watched it, I know that you don't spend as much time as me looking at Keir Starmer, but when you saw his face when a Tory MP put to him that the Ukrainians had agreed to a peace deal with Rubio, he looked as if he could be sick or burst into tears. He said, well, I didn't know about that. I'll have to go and study what are the real facts. In other words, he thought for a minute that actually the war was going to be over and that would be a disaster for him. In other words, they're in full flight, the enemies of peace in the West. They think they've got the ball at their feet. Do they? Can they change things?
Well, three things I think are important. Speaking to what you say, George, it's important that the viewers, and most of our viewers, thankfully, are relatively well educated, as opposed to the masses who are sadly exposed to the delusional drivel of the mainstream media every day, and not to their own fault. They're pickled in this delusional miasma of Russophobia. They'll know that it's very hard. If I asked you now, or any of our viewers, we put up a poll and asked them, who does the European Union, who does Ursula von der Leyen despise more, Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump? I'd say you'd be heading for a Brexit sort of style result in your poll. And this has cast the European Union in a really remarkably unprecedented situation. They're less relevant now than they ever have been. And it's purely by their own design. This self-harm delusion that they were going to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia was very, very plausible to some degree to them in their think tanks when they had the big, as they see it, stupid American cousin coming to visit with his baseball bat and his big fat wallet to, stand behind them and say, yeah, I don't really mind the Russians myself personally, but if you tell me he's a bad guy, we'll deal with them for you. The Russians now know that the big American cousin has basically left the room. And the Europeans, remember, a very fractious group of people, much like Rubio and Trump. Rubio, in the last couple of years, calling Trump a conman, a second-hand car dealer. So you got to remember the reality of these very fractious and terse alliances, and Europe is very much there right now. They're coming to terms with this unprecedented level of complete irrelevance, and that is fueling, in my view, a very dangerous sense of desperation to perpetuate the conflict at any cost. Now, I'm informed, and it's been suggested to me by people who may know, that this call was hacked from a WhatsApp call, and it was done by a foreign intelligence service and leaked to Bloomberg. Okay? Now, I don't think it was the U.S. intelligence service either. From what I'm told, it was a European intelligence service. Now, I'm not going to say who I've been told it may have been, but I'd advise you to look at who asked Pavel Durov to suppress anti-European and anti-NATO sentiment in the Moldovan and the Romanian elections, and you might get a clue as to who it was. So I think we're in a space now where the British secret services, the French, the Germans are very much now being tasked with finding any sort of granular element that can discredit the America-Russia relationship. And that is done for two reasons. Number one, to prolong the war, for them to come to some sort of political cohesive position to explain how they've, essentially destroyed the European Union economically, how they've isolated themselves from the biggest power in NATO politically, and how they are going to try to reverse out of that by some sort of political plausibility and move closer to a dominant position in the Euro-American relationship. Because most European political advisors, let's say, people who work in the background, people who work in NATO, people who work in the EU, in the European Bank, have seen themselves as the sort of intellectual superiors, George. You've seen this to the Americans, very much so. And they want to put themselves back into the ascendancy in that relationship too. It's very important to them. Meanwhile, people like Witkoff and Dmitriev and Trump are talking about mutual exploration in places like Antarctica, or in the Arctic, which is absolutely anathema to the Europeans, who have stood by and allowed the biggest act of environmental terrorism to take place with the destruction of Nord Stream, which was supplying immensely cheap, reliable, and clean energy into Europe. And we had, I think, in the last 48 hours, Alice Weidel from the AfD saying the first thing we will do when we take power in Germany is we're going to turn back on the Russian gas. So they're so desperate to prevent the emperor's clothes being described for exactly what they are. There's nothing off the table. And that's, I think the focus is now, if you see, suddenly Bloomberg has a call which is completely illegal. As transcripts that were obviously handed. Bloomberg doesn't have a capacity to harvest that call. But nobody in the Western media is saying, how did they attain this illegally obtained information? Imagine this was a Russian newspaper publishing a call between Marco Rubio and a senior advisor. There would be an absolute outcry. There'd be doors getting kicked in all over Europe looking for the source of this stuff. So you have to take a step back and look at, number one, how this leak has, for once and for all, defined the complicity of the Western media as an essential cog in the machine of convincing people that Russia is the enemy, because, they have no capacity to do this themselves. It was handed to them by an intelligence agency. And so now you can't trust Bloomberg. Kirill Dmitriev, has personally denied this, that this is not an accurate reflection of the call we had. So it seems to me that all of the energy that's been put into telling you that Ukraine is a democracy, there's no Nazis in Ukraine, that Ukraine was winning the war, that the Russian economy was doomed, that Vladimir Putin was dying, all of the energy that's gone to that has now switched into, in some way, throwing a spanner in the works to try and, it's like a jilted ex-lover at a wedding. Speak now or forever hold your peace. They're clamoring to find a way to prevent even the beginnings of a tangible peace. And of course, as soon with Donald Trump, and I've said this many times, I agree with your caller that I think Donald Trump has some sincerity about him about peace, but there's a massive naivety too. And that naivety is driven in some ways, and here's the nice word, is serendipitously by personal, sort of ego. He wants on the shelf behind him, I saw the Ukrainian-Russian war. He's not really interested in the minutiae, in the granular details of how complex this war is. An 870-kilometre-long active front line, never seen before, a massive conflict, a nuclear superpower. He's not that interested in this. So he's delegating the minutiae and detail to people to get it done quickly. And that's why the non-traditional diplomacy is taking place. And again, that runs into something of a wall when it's presented to the pros and the veterans who say, hold on, boys, you're above your pay grade here. And remember, they want to pull it back in and say, we have to make sure that this is a deal is done on the basis of reflecting reality. These territories in Ukraine, which were once Ukraine, are now Russian according to the Russian constitution. They're part of Russia. I mean, let's not forget that these places were declared as part of the Russian Federation. Vladimir Putin's entire political legacy is attached to delivering that reality to the Russian people who haven't, sacrificed nothing for this. People have died. People are dying. And people are suffering in other ways in Russia. Not as much as the West would like to tell you. But of course, no country, is delighted to fight a war for 4 years. Of course it's not. People tire of war. Economically, there are issues. So people want it over. And at the same time, they understand what has to actually happen to end it, which will probably not happen at a negotiating table once the Europeans, people like Zelensky, Yermak, these exceptionally corrupt people. And a point on Yermak, 3 days ago, Yermak was about to be sacked at the behest of his own political party. And I'm told that he went to Zelensky and showed him the compromise he had on Zelensky and said, I'm not getting sacked. I'm getting promoted and I'm going to negotiate this deal. And lo and behold, 24 hours later, Mr. Yermak is in Geneva negotiating a peace deal for Ukraine. It's quite remarkable stuff, George.
It is, and there's going to be a lot of blood on the snow then this winter. The war drags on. It is a grinding war of attrition, but it has begun to speed up now, hasn't it? Where along the line do you see the next Russian successes? And do you agree with me that the longer the war goes on, then hitherto unimagined targets like Odessa, like Transnistria, begin to move up the agenda?
Yeah, well, look, I think we've discussed Odessa before, and it's a real, you'll always get debate in Russia from a taxi driver, from a person in a shop, a colleague about the war. People will say, I support it. I begrudgingly support it. A minority would say they don't support it. But when it comes to Odessa, you will really struggle to go out on the streets of Moscow and find someone who would say to you that they don't want Odessa to come back to the motherland. You know, this Russian city established by Catherine the Great, it holds great emotional and historic value to the Russians. And they see what's happening there right now, oppression of the language, people getting abducted. It's very close, as you say, to this Russian enclave in Moldova, the PMR, the Prednistrovyan Moldovan Republic, which fought a very brutal short war against a very nationalistic Moldova at the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. A small Russian garrison stationed there as peacekeepers as well, and a huge arsenal for Soviet-era weapons. Well, one of the biggest in the world is still there. Yeah. So it's a very important and geostrategically important piece of territory. And that is just literally now 100 kilometers, 150, 180 kilometers away from the Kinburn Spit, which is a long projection of land that comes down at the mouth of the Dnieper River, which, interestingly, the Ukrainians say they want control of this Kinburn spit as part of their counter proposal to the Russian plan. So I think, there's a sense in Russia now as well that we might as well be hung for a sheep as a lamb. We're heading into our 20th sanctions package now. What is the rationale for us to hold back in Ukraine? There's a significant street feeling of that to that extent. We've sacrificed a lot. What more can they do to it? Let's push forward and at least take Odessa, Kherson as well. But there's also a political school, if you like, in Russia, which is very heavily influenced by the military. Russia's a very martial culture in many ways, and the army is a very powerful institution, very loyal to Vladimir Putin. But they've also made a lot of sacrifices. So as the war goes on, it becomes harder to bring people along in the idea that you would cede back territory that men have died fighting for, that you could ever countenance saying, this isn't Russian territory. These four regions aren't Russian. I mean, that is just absolutely unthinkable. I think the delusionists in the West who actually believe that the Russians would ever even consider, sitting down at a table to discuss Crimea being returned to Ukraine is delusional. And interestingly, today I posted something very interesting on my ex. The Speaker of the House in the Rada in Ukraine, I think it's Stefanchuk, Ruslan Stefanchuk. He said that this war will only end when we take back Crimea. He actually said that today. Meanwhile, I found a photograph of his son eating a pizza in Florence in Italy, and I posted it beside it. So there's this absolute theatre being portrayed in Europe and in Ukraine, as of course we know about the corruption. I mean, that was last week's story. But remember, all of these things are tied in very neatly together. Suddenly, Mr. Zelensky wants to fly to Turkey to talk peace. He wants to go to Washington for Thanksgiving. Forget about the corruption. Forget about the 100 million stolen from the nuclear power stations, George. Sure, where could you afford to lose 100 million, which was earmarked for safety projects, other than, the country that gave us Chernobyl?
It's resting in an account somewhere, as someone once said. Chay Bowes, you're a superstar. Thanks for that tour of the horizon on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Much obliged to you, my friend. I should have taken a break 13 minutes ago. Let me do it now. Then it's your calls right up until Gayatri's spot, giving us the social media roundup. Stay tuned. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decisions. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing. And he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So more on that breaking news out of Washington, D.C. Washington is in lockdown tonight as police respond to a shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers, some say 3 National Guard soldiers, just outside the White House. The victims' conditions are unknown, but the area between 17th and I Street are close to Farragut Square is taped off, so stay away from it. Police say a suspect who is wounded is now in custody. Earlier, he was still at large. An investigation is ongoing. Let's go to Canada, where Federico wants to talk about Venezuela and Ukraine. Go ahead, Federico.
Thank you, George. Good afternoon here in Canada. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, but if the President Volodymyr Zelensky don't ask for democratic elections pretty soon and quit his job because he's an illegal president in Ukraine, he better ask for it. Sure. Otherwise, he's going to be betrayed by his own entourage, I believe. He's going to be killed, or he's going to look for some kind of placement in Israel. I don't think that's going to happen. He's talking about the dignity of the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian people right now has no dignity because he's being submitted to the whim of the United States of America and the British. Now, speaking about British and Europeans, George, I think that the dignity of Europeans represented by the European Union in the head of, even though she has not been elected publicly by anybody, to represent Europe in the political foreign policy decisions in the European Union. She doesn't represent anybody, but she wants European people to keep insisting on supporting Ukraine on a lost war already. If the President Volodymyr Zelensky do not ask for democratic elections, if that is possible, Russia is going to continue earning and gaining territory in Ukraine. We all know that that war has been lost from the beginning. Okay, that's one. The second part will be, George, Venezuela. The United States wants to get two birds with one stone, that is Venezuela and Colombia. We have to consider that there are 7 military bases in Colombia, so he can start and spark a battle with both countries if any of the American soldiers die for whatever reason, even if it's CIA-operated reasons. Why do I say that? 7 bases. Any American soldiers can be killed, and that will justify for President Trump and his entourage, which is composed by Caribbean narco-traffickers, according to President Petro of Colombia. So the might spark, whether in Venezuela, which I think he's going to intervene, or might spark in one of the 7 bases that are in Colombia. President Petro has stand his ground, and I don't think that the gold and the oil are going to be given that easy by the Venezuelan president, neither by the president of Colombia. The president of Colombia has seized more than 2,700 tons of cocaine, has extradited to Europe more than 600 narco-traffickers, according to President Donald Trump and Marco Rubio. Narco Rubio, they call him Narco Rubio, because his antecedents show some narco-traffic in the past with some of his family. So I think that another Vietnam is not possible for the United States. But considering President Trump and considering that Israel is infiltrated Colombia for the last, and Central and South America for the last 50 to 60 years, they are against President Petro too. They want to take 2 birds with one stone. The problem is, are they?
Well, just because of the hour, Federico, let me intervene at that point. They want 3 birds with one stone: Venezuela and Colombia, but also Cuba. They figure that if they can seize Venezuelan oil, if they can capture the presidency of in Caracas of Venezuela, that they will thereby deny fuel supplies to Cuba, which has, I think, the 3rd or 4th blackout this very month with insecure fuel supply. And that would be, of course, the big enchilada for them. They can't invade Cuba. Scott Ritter believes they can't invade Venezuela either, but they certainly can't invade Cuba. They've done that before, and it ended in what is universally known as the Bay of Pigs fiasco. The Cuban Communist Party has 1 million members under arms. Each one of them would die rather than surrender Cuba's sovereignty, which has been theirs and treasured by them ever since 1959. So they can't invade Cuba. All they can do is try and quarantine it. And it's a long way for Cuba's friends, China, Russia, Iran, to supply oil and fuel to the besieged island. So I only differ from your analysis in that I think they have 3 birds, not just 2, in their sights. Emma Bovary says, tell us how Gaza is today. It's disastrous, as an earlier caller from Jamaica pointed out. 1,500 buildings have been demolished since the ceasefire. The ceasefire is defiled every single day. Hundreds of people have been killed. As always, most of them women and children, sometimes entire family lines. Grandmother, grandfather, father, mother, sons, daughters, in-laws, etc., are all wiped out, wiped off the historical record, an entire family bloodline. And of course, the hunger is still extreme. Only a quarter, at most, of the food needs of Gaza are being now met, when the ceasefire agreement is supposed to allow upwards of 500 trucks every single day. Not even a quarter of that is obtaining entry into Gaza. Mind you, there have been substantial deliveries of mobile telephones which have been given out to the people in Gaza. And predictably, of course, some of those have started to explode. Moss Pachuli says water rains in Gaza, soaking everything, bringing more misery to the Palestinians. Indeed so. And Moss continues, the UN condemns torture in a landslide vote, but Israel and the US oppose the resolution, both quite happy, torturing and killing people. Israel stealing another 285 acres of Palestinian land, which was covered in olives that have all now been burned down. And Dai says, good morning, Venezuela. He thinks, he hopes. Anthony is in Detroit on Trump. Go ahead, Anthony.
Hi, George. I was thinking that Trump, he was looking pretty weak, pretty impotent about a week ago with, he had to capitulate on the Epstein files. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene was fighting him and exposing him. But her sudden resignation, I feel like that's given Trump a win, and it's made him come out stronger, which, is a real shame, because now he's going to be emboldened, because he's all about perception. So it was a shame that she went up to fight him and then just bent the knee, and now he's going to be...
Well, I wonder if there's more to it. Anthony. She says not, but might she be preparing for a presidential run?
He very well may, but Americans don't like a quitter. So even if she was starting to speak some truth, we're not going to take that very well.
Fair point. Very, very fair point. But the Donald Trump's political position looks to me now extremely isolated. He has destroyed a very considerable part of his most militant base. He hasn't just lost Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's lost Tucker Carlson, he's almost entirely lost Alex Jones, he has substantially lost the support of Steve Bannon, and many, many others are beginning to question his judgment, and some even to question his continuing fitness for office. So he's in a very weak position. But if he wanted to, he could take the bull by the horns on this Ukraine question. He could say, stop sabotaging me. Don't think by leaking things you're going to divert me. I'm serious. I'm ending this war. And I'm certainly going to end America's involvement in this war. Its involvement in every sense, through every dimension. What's he got to lose? He'd be the man that stopped the potential World War III. How's that for a legacy? He's only got 2.5 years left, just under 3 years. He can't run again. What's he got to lose? Find your balls, Donald. The balls that you showed coming down that escalator when you entered presidential politics for the first time. Be a man, Donald. Be a man. Now, have you downloaded the podcast yet? It's available every Monday. It's a bite-sized version of the show. You can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. Now, we are growing and growing in the website, in the podcast. This week, we're in the top 10 in Guatemala for the first time, in Egypt, Bulgaria, and Luxembourg for politics. And we're in the top 20 in Qatar, Kuwait, South Africa, and in the top 40 for politics in Spain. Speaking English, we're in the top 40 for politics in Spain. Speaking of Spanish-speaking people, here is our queen, Donna, in Panama. Donna, welcome back.
Buenas noches. It's actually tardes for me. Tardes for me, noches for you. So I wanted to tell you, and I know time is of the essence. They're saying, there's a rumor, I sound like Trump now, people are saying that the 2026 midterms, which at this point, if it were held today, would definitely throw a bunch of Republicans out and bring the Democrats back in control of the House. They're saying that the Republicans may try to steal it, or may, in fact, steal it. They have so much time to prepare for it that they are going to find a way to steal it. I don't know, that through voter, when few people vote, the Republicans tend to win. When everybody turns out and votes, the Democrats usually win. So they can do it through voter suppression. Anyway, but that's not what I'm calling about. I am calling because you're the wonderful guest you had recently, Professor Glenn Deason, interviewed, I don't know if you saw it, interviewed this Asian, I think he may be Asian American. He has an accent, but it doesn't mean that he's not a citizen. He has a podcast. His name is Zhang. It's an Chinese name, I believe, Zhang, and I can't pronounce the first name. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, he has a podcast apparently called Predictive History. And he has studied, he's done a very scientific study of empires, past, present, and, as he would say, future also. And he says there's 3 elements that predict an empire rising. And the 3 elements are energy, right? And he's not talking about oil and gas. He means the populace is energetic, enthusiastic, ready to work hard. The second is openness. And he means, yes, curiosity, but also an ability, a willingness to look at their mistakes from the past, learn from them, and then apply what they've learned in the present and future. And the third thing is cohesiveness. a population that is not at loggerheads the way the United States is, and I think probably in a lot of Europe is, not divided. And he said that this is true of all of the empires, the Athenian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the American Empire, and he thinks that the coming empire, the empire that is rising, that has all three of these elements, is what he calls Pax Judaica. In other words, Israel. And he thinks the greater Israel project, he's not applauding this, he's not celebrating, he's simply predicting. And he says it's going to be, Syria's destroyed, Iraq is in tatters, Gaza's destroyed, and he thinks that this will be a prime business opportunity for people who want to go in and build it back up and invest and so on. And he thinks that's what we are in the market for. And as I said, he's not lamenting, he's not celebrating, he's simply predicting.
Well, it's
and
very
that's
interesting.
What
I can't. I'll have to watch the. I'll have to watch the interview because I can't quite see it. I can't see a more divided polity than the Israeli polity. Of course, Netanyahu is still the top dog. If there was an election, he'd probably still be the top dog. But a vast proportion of Israel hates his guts. It's true he has, thanks to the United States, enormous destructive potential. He has destroyed Syria. He is in the process of destroying Lebanon. He has, with American help, destroyed Gaza. He may very well move now onto the West Bank. But that's about the limit of this Pax Judaica, and it will not be Pax for very long because every single one of those places has within it the nascent ability to fight back, and they will indeed, when they recover from the shock and destruction of it all, begin to do so. The Haaretz newspaper this very week, in fact yesterday, in a denunciation of Netanyahu, which it is staggering to read. If you ever dreamt that such an article could appear in the British or American press, then just take a look at it. It is an indictment of Netanyahu and of the Israel that he has built that is staggering, chilling, and definitely not vivacious in energy in the way that you described. But Donna, as always, deeply grateful for your call. Robert is in my old stamping ground of Glasgow. Wants to talk about the UK budget. Go ahead, Robert.
Hello, George.
Hi.
George, my question's about today about the budget and Rachel Reeves and accountability, to be honest with you. It's like, at the moment, what we have got is a government who takes our taxes and continually use our taxes for foreign affairs without accountability. Where is the accountability? If I give you my money from my pocket, right? No, seriously, if I give you my money and I said to you, I want you to use my money, I would like to know how you spent my money. There is no accountability in the government of where our money is being used. And I don't think this is correct. How would you...
Well, there isn't in practice. Yeah, there isn't in practice, Robert, but in theory, of course, there is maximum accountability. The government is accountable to the House of Commons. The House of Commons is elected by you and me. Now, if we elected a group of stewmers and comic singers, drunkards and thieves and idiots, well, that's on us. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is answerable to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is accountable to the House of Commons. And we only had an election a year ago. And we did, indeed, in that election, elect the worst bunch of scoundrels ever elected. They're not just all the things I mentioned, they're also completely anonymous. They are completely unknown. They're not even legends in their own households. So the accountability is us. We have to ask ourselves. I mean, I can't upbraid myself on this because I stood in the election. And by fair means and quite a few foul, I came second. We stood in 151 constituencies. And we got 212,000 votes. If you gross that up, that makes us a 1 million vote party. But Keir Starmer got many millions more. And he has a disproportionate parliamentary majority, which means he's secure. Except from his own party, he's secure as Prime Minister for the next 4 years, or just under, just a little bit more than 3 years. The truth is, it's too late to cry now. Sure, we must oppose everything that they do, by any means that we can, in writing, on Facebook, on Twitter, in protests. Our people were on the big protest against digital ID at the weekend. You might have seen our banner there. We were there in numbers. We oppose this government by any democratic means that we can. But unless people join us, unless people say, I'm with you, what do you want me to do? Then all I can do is cry against it. All I can do is rage against it, as you just have powerfully there. Now, back to that breaking news. It's now being reported that the 2 military officers shot close to the White House have died. They've been killed. The suspect is in custody and the area has been locked down. My goodness. Dramatic events. Gayatri, do I need to ask you what's rattling, or is that so obvious?
Well, dramatic events indeed. I would just like to return to your earlier breaking news on Imran Khan in Pakistan, where it was reported that he was found dead in his jail. This was reported so by the Afghanistan Times earlier today. But the Pakistani authorities, the media and fact checkers maintain this is false and a hoax, and that they have tried before claiming he died. But nevertheless, whether it's true or not, at this point they're denying it. It is very tense outside the jails because Imran Khan's sister has been denied her right to visit him, and so protests have piled up, and so we can definitely say it's tense outside the jail.
Of course, they can easily solve it by putting Imran on the television. They can easily solve it by releasing him.
Yes, because this time around they did release a picture of Imran Khan, which looked a bit shocked. You could read it as him being dead or just being hurt.
Is that the one where he seemed to be lying down?
Yes, yeah. We don't know, but it is a tense situation.
I mean, it's impossible to exaggerate how serious a development that would be for Pakistan.
I pray it's a hoax, and I pray.
Amen.
I pray for that. Not to be ironic, but what I do want to discuss, who did die on this day, are two great men from Latin America. The first one is Maradona on this day in 2020, and Comandante Fidel Castro, who you mentioned before, on this day in 2016.
They died on the same day.
They died on the same day. Imagine.
Wow. They were great friends as well.
Yeah.
Maradona was a real friend of Fidel.
They were great friends of each other, and they were great friends of Palestine. So that's a wonderful fact.
That's a melancholy fact. I didn't realize that they had died on the same day, but I did, and it's gone kind of viral.
It's gone kind of viral because you
did
obviously
mark the death of Comandante Fidel.
Yeah, in which you...
There he is there with Camilo, with the cowboy hat on. I mean, Fidel knew everybody. He was a walking history book. There he is with Sukarno.
That's it. That's him with my president. His death was a great loss. And there he is with Che Guevara. You met this great man, though. You
Many
spent
times,
a great length of time with him. Can you share a little insight into that? Because you have a book. There is the Fidel Castro handbook that you have, and it's full of
It's a good
wonderful
book and
stories.
great pictures. Some of these pictures actually are in the book. Yeah, I mean, I met him many times. I spent hundreds of hours with Fidel. There we are. That's my favorite picture. Apart from our wedding picture, we spent hundreds of hours together. He was the greatest man I ever met, and by a long distance. And people sometimes ask me how. Well, first of all, he was a great talker, as everybody knows, but he was also a great listener. And he had a thirst for knowledge, which was undimmed even on the last occasion when I met him. He was as hungry for information about all kinds of obscure things. I've told you once before, I think, he took a map of Scotland down and he gave me a picture of a Highland cow and asked me to show him on the map where Highland cows were situated in our country.
And you couldn't?
No, I could. I did. That was easy. It was when he asked me the total tonnage of North Sea oil that I was completely lost. I couldn't.
That you couldn't?
I could have told him to the nearest 100 billion barrels. And he looked at me as if to say, "Are you sure you're a British member of Parliament?" So he didn't just talk to you. He asked you things.
He talked.
He wanted to know.
He had a conversation.
Things. And he was himself a walking history book from the revolution itself and its triumph throughout the standoff with the United States. The U.S. terrorists in the CIA tried hundreds of times to murder him.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about terrorism. They talk about Maduro. The Americans admit that they tried hundreds of times to murder the leader of the country next door to them.
Yeah, and as we're talking about Trump, the peace president that he would like to be portrayed as and remembered as, the one thing that occurs or as an annual almost tradition at the UN General Assembly is the resolution for the lifting of U.S. embargoes on Cuba. And it's just a token suggestion. Majority is against it, and only USA and Israel are...
Sometimes they have the Marshall Islands on their side.
Sometimes, yeah. But to give credit to President Obama at the time, that was the 1 year that America abstained on this very resolution. This was in 2016, and this was when President Obama met with the then brother of Fidel Castro, President Raúl Castro.
Yeah.
So that was the only year.
It's
so
all been downhill.
It's been downhill.
Cuba has problems now, but they will never defeat Cuba. Cuba is like nowhere else.
No. We have reached the end of the show, but not before mentioning the most big donors of tonight. These are the following: Raymond Blessin, Motas Salah, Stephen Rosema, Rek Mayer, and Isabella McCardle. So you too can become a donor, donate towards the show, towards the efforts in making the show. Just scan this QR code on your screen or go to moats.tv /donate. And
don't you want to show people your handiwork on Chinese social media?
I was going to go there because I really want to close on the news that we are expanding George's and Moat's clips and outputs onto the Chinese social media.
There's quite a few Chinese, yeah?
There's quite a few, but we started with Bilibili. If you're on it, please look us up, George Galloway Bilibili, and the other one is Weibo. Anyone in China or familiar with the Chinese social media sphere, these are accounts like X, Instagram on its own and 10 times bigger. It's China style, China measures, China standards, so we're talking...
Well, I'm always embarrassed. I don't know if I've said to you, I'm always embarrassed when we tell the Chinese how well we're doing in audience.
So that's why we always have
how
to
many
ask,
views we've got.
Yeah, when we say we've got...
it seems so small
we say
compared
we've got
to
so
theirs.
many views, which is a lot for our standards. Of course, not yours. So
Well, we're hoping to be big in Guangzhou and Shanghai and indeed all over the People's Republic. We've been working on this for a while, and Gayatri in particular, and our good friend Ivy in Shanghai. It's been their project, and it's taking off now. So follow us in Chinese. Why don't you? It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. It was an auspicious occasion, though not quite as auspicious as we'd hoped. We hoped that we'd be meeting tonight on the eve of the end of the Russia-Ukraine NATO conflict. Alas, that doesn't look like it's turning out to be true. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.